Talk more on basic education and some of the themes that have come out of a basic education indaba. We are now joined by Mugwena Maluleke, who is the Secretary General of SADTU. Thank you so much for joining us and welcome. Now, the President has issued a stern warning to underperforming schools. Your reaction as SADTU?
Well, we are saying education is a societal issue, and therefore we need to take collective responsibility because whilst the principals, whilst the teachers have got to take responsibility, there were circuits and district officials who were in charge of that particular schools, and clearly we need to understand what went wrong.
So what role is SADTU looking to play in that process?
Look, we are monitoring whether the Department of Education delivers the textbook, delivers learning support material for our children, but also whether they are employing teachers on time. We are fully aware that in the Eastern Cape, we are being told that the schools will only get the books in April. In Limpopo, they failed to deliver. We are also told that in many of the provinces, they cannot employ temporary teachers up until the end of January. So what the issue is, what then happens to our children during this particular period? Are we having temporary children or temporary schools? These are human beings. They are not temporary. They are human beings.
But now, what are the reasons behind that? For instance, in Limpopo, if textbooks are not delivered in time, in the Eastern Cape, it's the same problem. Teachers, they can only hire teachers from the end of January. What is the issue? Because I think, working from previous years, there should be some sort of improvement going forward.
One is lack of the human resource plan that would have told us what is missing, what is there, and what needs to be done. Because you cannot plan in January. You've got to plan by the end of November. You should be knowing exactly how many teachers you need. And because of that particular capacity problem and inefficiency by the officials, we find ourselves in a situation where learners are without teachers at the beginning of the year. And that is a human resource issue.
Speaking of human resource issue, is government doing enough or putting enough money in basic education, in the education system?
Government is putting money in the DBE. I cannot say it's enough because we have got huge infrastructure backlogs. We have got huge needs that we need to improve our schooling system. However, the 6% of the GDP is something that is an international norm, and therefore the issue is the money allocated to deal with the quality of education, or are we paying so many bureaucrats, so many ministers of education in our country? Almost about 10, isn't it? Yeah.
Now, what repercussions are there for companies or whoever's dealing with ensuring that schools in the public sector get all the required textbooks? What happens to them? Are they let go? Is there any repercussions? Are there any measures put in place to ensure that next time they do a proper job, or what's the stance on that?
Look, we're waiting for the president to say that. And instead, he has chosen just only to focus on the principals and the school management. Instead, they are not delivering textbooks. They're not paying the teachers. They are just there to make sure that children are being taught. And therefore, these departmental officials who have not deposited the money for the schools to be able to pay. For example, in the Eastern Cape, the publishers can't deliver the books because they've not been paid. So they have got to pay them before they can deliver those particular books. And therefore, it is simple a management issue at the level of the department and not an issue of the principal. So if it was the company that was wrong, clearly it is that particular company's name was going to be tarnished, and obviously no company would want its brand to be damaged. So they do their best to ensure that they are able to deliver if they are paid, but they are not being paid because the treasury is not willing to cooperate in terms of really seeing education out of this particular crisis we find ourselves.
Now let's speak about what SADTU is hoping will come out of this basic education indaba taking place.
Well, we think that this indaba has given us an opportunity to raise those particular obstacles that are really causing all these particular problems. Like we have just discussed the issue of human resources, transformational issues. We also have raised that education is not grade 12. education is the 12 years, and therefore we need to be able to deal with that. So we hope that we can see some change in attitude, but also change in mindset of all of us to ensuring that we regard these children as our own children and making sure that indeed they have got the teachers, they have got the resources to be used so that they are able to succeed in life. So we hope that critical is about the change of hearts by all of us to collectively take responsibility, to be accountable to our communities and be able to rescue this education.
Is there a crisis in education in South Africa?
Well, I always say that we cannot be saying it's crisis. We have got serious challenges because we have got places where there is improvement, there's efficiency, but we also have areas where there's lack of consequences that we see it, instead of improving, we see them really not, actually is regressing in Limpopo, that they were under administration and again they cannot deliver books and they are not paying the teachers. I mean, how on earth do we expect the children to be taught by hungry, demotivated, low moral teachers? It is not possible.
Now, Mugwena, let's speak about SADTU as a teachers union. What are some of the challenges, apart from what you've just mentioned now, that sometimes teachers are not paid on time or they're not paid at all? Are we producing enough teachers as a country, and for them to be placed in all the different areas, in public schools, whether in rural areas and in urban areas? What's the situation there?
Currently, we are not producing enough teachers. If we do produce the teachers, we are not producing the teachers that are informed by the analysis that we make in terms of what is the country looking for in terms of human resources for the country, but also in terms of the subjects that are being taught. Are we producing enough math teachers, enough language teachers, on science teachers? That's the issue. So if we are producing, we are not producing the relevant product for that matter.
What's the problem there? Where does it go wrong?
The problem is lack of proper planning again. Is that we do not have a human resource plan by the Department of Education that is linked to the country's human resource development strategy, so that we are then able to know exactly what is it that we need and so forth. So you realize that natural attrition and those who are resigning are more than what we are able to produce, and we continuously suffer from the rural areas where we are not able to have teachers highly qualified to be in the rural areas. Something that, of course, in terms of the human resource plan that we are talking about, we should be able to know that how many teachers we need in the rural areas, what incentives are we going to give them so that they are able to stay in the rural areas and give our children quality education, the same education that the child in township or suburb schools or in the northern suburbs are able to receive.
Now, a basic education endeavor currently taking place. Is there cooperation between government and unions with regards to basic education in the country?
Well, to a certain extent, yes. We are cooperating and we are prepared to work with the government. We are prepared to work with the Department of Education to improve the quality of education. Of course, there will always be those particular challenges, because if certain officials take a neoliberal approach and a posture, clearly they would want to view the unions as being an obstacle towards reforms, whereas we are supposed to be taking each other as partners and be able to work together in the interest of our country.
Now, Mugwena, in 2016, for instance, there was improvement in the matric results, but provinces like the Eastern Cape, KwaZulu-Natal, there wasn't really much that happened. Yes, it was stable in KwaZulu-Natal, but in the Eastern Cape, it was a red light, basically, that was shone on the Eastern Cape province, and the issues of textbooks not arriving on time, even this year. Those challenges are very specific. What has SADTU done to engage with government going forward to ensure that we don't see the same results or same issues in the Eastern Cape, in KwaZulu-Natal, in other provinces going forward?
In the Eastern Cape, our union has requested for a crisis meeting, where we are saying that we need to be attending to all these particular problems, and we have been promised that we'll have that meeting with the Premier and everyone else in the executive so that we address that. In Limpopo, Limpopo, SADTU has been calling for efficiency, has been calling for people to take education very serious, and they have not done that. So on Thursday, our union will be marching in demand of those particular textbooks, but also calling upon the community to join hands with us to say, let's save our children as education, because this is our future. So we will be doing a lot of other things. In December, we had to take the department to court, both Eastern Cape and Limpopo, in order for them to address the issues of paying of salaries of the teachers. I mean, I think it's injustice to our children to have those teachers not being in the classes. So we're doing a lot of things.
Is that going to be enough?
Well, it's not going to be enough unless we have the leadership of our government also, like in the president, who has called for consequences for the principal. I still want to challenge our president. He needs to ensure that his bureaucrats and his political administration is service-oriented and not only interested in tenders.
Now, Mugwena, you emphasized a lot on the fact that with basic education, it's a 12-year process. It's not just matric, where it's the final year of the 12-year period where a child spends in school. Just looking at that, the side effects, opposed to treating the problem, because everyone seems to focus more on the matric, whereas, as you mentioned, and I think everyone needs to understand that it is a 12-year process. It is the beginning of a child's life going forward. And in churning out educators who are specifically going in different directions and not focusing on what is required in the country or what is needed in the country, for instance, you mentioned mathematics, science, English language, subjects like that. What needs to be done to ensure that that is understood, the fact that it is a 12-year process and it is a step-by-step process as SADTU and working with government? What are you hoping to achieve going forward with regards to that?
Well, we have raised the issue of early childhood development. We have said that we need an additional year before grade R, so that we are then able to prepare the children for schooling, prepare them for life. We have also said that there must be clear teacher development, that we will work with government. We will also be training, because we have got our own institutes as unions to be able to train additional teachers in terms of, one, understanding their curriculum, but also balancing the pedagogic knowledge and the subject content knowledge, improving on those particular skills. So we're hoping that if we work together, you have seen last week we have launched our partnership with the NECT, where we are saying we're going to train lead teachers, so that we are then able to ensure that each and every teacher understand what is required of him in the system, but also calling upon our teachers to also look at self-development and be able to really do everything they can to improve the quality of education. So we're hoping that if we can change our mindset and have positive attitude and see these children as our own, and not as statistics, not as targets, but as human beings, then we'll then be able to allow them to really take as much as they can from their schooling, and then be able to come back and really improve their communities and our country and our continent.
When you say, going back to what you said earlier, the fact that you're saying starting them early instead of starting at grade R, what then, that first year, because most kids, by the time they go to grade R, they've already been to preschool, where they are being prepared to go to grade R and then grade 1. How will that work? Because already there's a process in place.
No, the process is not enough, because if you look at the ECD, or early childhood development, it's highly privatized. It depends on whether you can be able to afford a preschooling. For now, is that many of the children from the working class, they only are able to go to grade R, and it's too late for that, because it's only a year, and therefore the following year they need to go into grade 1. So we are saying the NDP says 2 years of preschooling, and we are saying that you'll be looking at their health, you'll be looking at their readiness, you'll be orientating them and making sure that they are ready for grade R. So that is what we are looking at, to then say the Department of Education must consider doing that, because we need to develop some motor skills for them, but also making sure that their confidence is built up towards them benefiting out of grade 1 or grade R and so forth. So there's a lot that we need to be doing there. We need to look at the type of teachers that we have, or the type of practitioners that we have in the early childhood development. Are they clued up in terms of issues of education, issues of health, and so so forth, because the NDP says that the first 1,000 days of a child are very, very important. Look at the family, understand the socio-economic background of the family, and be able to help that. So there's a lot of work that we need to be doing, and therefore that investment that the president has spoken about needs to be channeled there and not into the bureaucracy.
So the possibility of a 13-year foundation phase, where instead of 12 years up until matric, now we might be looking at a 13-year
Yes,
period.
that we have raised it, and then we said that it's a possibility and we need to look into that. Many of the other countries are starting their children at 4 years, and therefore it is not impossible to have these children that can do anything today. We're not talking about maths, we're not talking about science, we're talking about readiness for schooling.
Time frames? What sort of time frames are you looking at to sort of get this in process and start working on it?
Look, we have given ourselves as SADTU to then say by June we need to see some of these particular proposals put in place in terms of planning for implementation 2018.
Mugwena, thank you so much for joining us. We have to leave it there.
Great pleasure indeed.
That was Mugwena Maluleke, who is the General Secretary of Teacher Union SADTU, joining us live in studio.